Turn to this now. Fewer JSE-listed entities are submitting compliance reports in terms of broad-based black economic empowerment. This is one of the findings of the B-BBEE Commission 2019 National Status and Trends Report. The Commission says it's concerned with the overall slow pace of economic transformation. For more on that, we're joined now via Zoom by the Commission's Commissioner, Zodwa Ntuli. Good morning. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Ntuli. You have two reports out, and I'd like to start with the latest one that came in 2 days ago that has to do with major deals that sort of, promote black ownership of entities in our economy as a measure of transformation of the economy. And the picture is not so great. What did you find in terms of major deals that are defined as deals from 25 million rand and above?
Thank you, Thulasizwe. I'd like to indicate that, firstly, we are happy that we are seeing that there is activity around ownership transactions. And we are really excited that, more activity is initiated by the private sector. So major B transactions for us are an indication of whether we will be in a position to achieve the ownership element of the B-BBEE Act, which basically aims to facilitate the transfer of ownership and to include the black people in the economy, in the ownership of the economy. And so in terms of the activities that we see and what we find is that, yes, we've looked at about 95 transactions that have been filed with us. And but what we have picked up in the report is that of the 95 transactions, only 70 were able to be registered by us because they met the requirements for registration, and 25 of those were rejected for non-compliance. But then the next step that we then do as the Commission is to go into the assessment of the individual transactions. Yeah. And there are a number of concerns that are coming out of the individual assessment, which I will deal with later. But I think the most important thing to indicate is that we have received the transactions, 95, which are of total value of 112 billion, and which, if this is an indication of, the activity in the economy, it seems okay, it seems good, but there needs to be a way of accelerating it.
Well, you're saying it seems okay, but if you compare it with, because these are figures for the 2018-2019 financial year, and you're talking about 95 major transactions of over 25 million rand black ownership transfer, and they come up to about 112 billion rand. The previous year, you had 272 transactions, and they amounted to some 188 billion rand, closer to 200 billion rand. Isn't that a regression?
At the moment, I would say that, yes, there is a slight decline if you look at it. However, the 272 of last year was for a longer period, in the sense that there were transactions that had occurred also prior to 2014 that were registered. Right. So based on the comparisons, yes, of course, then the numbers are increasing. What I'm indicating by the fact that the numbers are increasing is the fact that at the moment, with this financial year, we have seen about 109 transactions. Right. That have been registered. So from the 95 of last year, this year the numbers are increasing as well slightly. What we would like to see, however, is that these transactions become transactions that are fully compliant. So our concern is around the compliance levels, and that emanates from how these deals are largely structured.
Yes, absolutely.
The deals are structured, yes.
In fact, let's go into that, the details, because you're saying 70 of the 95 major transactions that presented before you, 70 of those met the requirements for registration by you, but 25 didn't. And I read some of what the reasons are for non-compliance, and I'm worried. Something about not being able to trace. If you're saying that you've transferred to black ownership, but you can't pinpoint one single black individual who now has a stake in the company. What were some of those trends? What leads to some of those situations?
Yes, let me clarify this again. Of the 70, we've already assessed about 80% of those individually. So the trends that we are indicating to you are the trends that are arising out of those ones, the 80% that we have looked at. And all of the entities that have filed those transactions have received their feedback, and they are in the process of aligning. And there are about 12 of them which have been referred for investigation because they've indicated that they do not want to align, but they do not also want to exclude that black ownership. So I think overall we've got a majority of the entities that have received feedback aligning to the relevant requirements of the B-BBEE Act. And so now the challenge about these transactions is, these are the common challenges that we found in these ones. So the whole purpose about the ownership element is to de-racialize the economy of South Africa. It means that we must see real black people acquiring ownership in the economy of South Africa. So now the first thing that is a concern for us as the Commission is that in most of the transactions where we gave feedback, the parties are battling to give us the real natural black person who's the owner. So we find multiple entities in the structure. However, it becomes difficult for them to ultimately give us the real and the actual owner, especially also in some of the broad-based schemes where the communities and the either employees are being recognized as the ones contributing to the black ownership of the company. We're also battling to find just a list of those beneficiaries. The B-BBEE Act requires that for you to claim that an entity is black-owned, we must be able to find the natural black person that is a citizen of South Africa that meets the definition of that particular requirement in the Act. The second issue that we have found, which is a concern, is that increasingly the percentages that are acquired, in this 95%, it is expected that black people have acquired 60% of the ownership. However, if you look at the participation and the voting rights that are extended to these black people according to the agreements, you find that increasingly the voting rights and their participation in the entity where apparently they own shares is severely restricted. Right. And the figures that we have right now are indicating to us that that has significantly reduced. The voting rights of black people have reduced to about 32%, when the actual ownership on paper tells us that it's 60%.
Sure, that's concerning. Lastly, because I'm out of time, Commissioner, which are the sectors that are showing promise, and which are the sectors that you are worried about in terms of, transformation of ownership? We saw this issue coming to the fore recently in sectors such as tourism, when it had to do with, access to assistance and, funding from government during this lockdown period to help businesses cope, where there was suddenly this debate now about whether to continue to apply the B-BBEE, requirements to companies for them to qualify for this assistance. So which sectors are showing encouraging signs, and which sectors are you worried about that just refuse to transform?
Look, the period that we've measured is really difficult for us to say these sectors are doing very well. But in the two periods that we've looked at, we've seen consistently that construction, transport, those are the sectors that are moving. And we are seeing also that the financial sector in this particular report has indicated a high value in terms of the transactions that have been concluded, although it doesn't indicate that there are a number of transactions, like more transactions. It's just that the value is high. So the transport has been, and construction here, they have been consistent in terms of increasing that. That may be also because the requirements in that sector is more around 51% black ownership. So a lot of companies are moving towards that. But you will see that last year, in fact, tourism it was second in terms of the transactions that had happened in that particular sector in terms of the value. So each year we might find that some of the transactions are moving towards a higher level of the ownership. Like the ICT, for instance, since they adopted the 30% ownership target, a lot of the activities in that are geared towards achieving that 30%. Right. So what I would like to say is that all of the sectors, they need to work hard, because the level at which we are, the report that we issued last week indicates that overall we are at around 29% black ownership. If you look at the fact that in South Africa, over 90% of the people, of the population is black people, then it is important that the ownership does correspond to the population and demographics of the country. And we need to change how we structure these deals. Yeah. They must transfer real ownership to black people.
Commissioner Ntuli, thank you so much for your time this morning here on ENCA.